유리와 일반 유리로 되어 있습니다.
잘했어.
Hello guys, John here. In this video we will continue the last part of the Squid Game. In this part we will find out the mastermind behind the previous terrible game, and also who the participants who managed to escape and get a prize of 45.6 billion won. So, let's get into the movie. The movie begins by being shown the circumstances after the marble game is over. The participants who returned to their room were very surprised because it turned out that Mi Ryong was not eliminated and still survived. On the other hand, Frontman is also still worried because he has not been able to find intruders inside the game arena. For a while, VIP guests will come to visit. Therefore, Frontman continues to tell the organizers to always be vigilant and continue to look for the intruder. After the day, the VIP guests arrived and were immediately greeted by Frontman. Just like Frontman and the others, VIP guests also used masks to hide their identities. Back then, Frontman represented the big bosses to welcome and serve the guests because the big boss still had other affairs. It is these guests who invest their money as bets in previous games of play. Now they are visiting to witness the players there firsthand. Afterwards, Junho, who was still in hiding, decided to snatch the other costumes so that he could get closer to the guests, as well as take some videos as evidence. Shortly thereafter, the fifth game arrived. Before starting the game, the participants were asked to choose a vest that read numbers 1 through 16. The selection of the vest will determine their fate in this game. The frightened participants immediately took the middle number because they felt the number must be safe. Until the time of Ji-hun's turn, the remaining numbers are numbers 1 and 16. Initially, Gi-hun wanted to take number 1, but the other participants begged him because he was too afraid to be the last participant. In the end, Gi-hun relented and allowed the participant to take the first number. After the selection of numbers, they were faced with a glass bridge. Within 16 minutes, each player must cross that glass bridge in their order. The glass bridge is made of two different types of glass, which means that if the player steps wrong, then they will immediately fall and die. Being a starting player is the most difficult task because if they step wrong, then the player behind them can be safe for choosing a strong glass. However, being the last player is also not easy, because players have to race against time that keeps going. Long story short, the fifth game begins. One by one the players began to dare to jump over the glass bridge. Not a few of them failed to choose the right glass and just fell. With time running out, the players became impatient and decided to push the player in front of them. Until finally, Doksu reached the leading position. Of course, no one dared to fight him, let alone push him. Doksu insisted that he would remain in his position so that no participants escaped the game. An annoyed Mi Ryong then jumped towards him and tightly held the Doksu's body. She sacrificed himself by bringing Doksu to fall with him. After several players fell and died, there are now only 4 players left. A player in pole position turned out to be a worker in a glass factory. Therefore, he can also distinguish strong glass and ordinary glass. With his ability, he managed to bring Sangwoo, Se-byuk, and Gi-hun, who were behind him, safely. But when in his last step, the frontman who knew it deliberately turned off the lights so that they became difficult to find the right glass. It also makes the player buy too much time. As a result, Sangwoo also showed his true self. He could push the player when thanks to that player they were able to advance safely. Right at the last moment, Sang-woo, Se-byuk and Gi-hun immediately ran before the glass bridge was destroyed so that the glass flew and scratched some parts of their bodies. From different rooms, the guests seemed to be quite satisfied with the outcome of the game this time around. Junho, who was there, was still busy serving them. Then a guest seemed to like Junho and told him to sit nearby. After that, the man took Junho to another room. Junho, who felt himself insulted, was finally angry and pointed his gun at the man. Junho then asked the man to provide any information about the venue. It was then recorded by Junho to serve as evidence. After getting the footage, Junho beat the man unconscious and Junho immediately ran away from the game arena using a diving device there. Frontman also told some of his men to join in looking for Junho. Shortly thereafter, Junho reached the opposite island. He wants to contact the police chief for help while sending evidence on his mobile phone. But because he couldn't get the signal, he decided to climb to higher ground. Soon, Frontman and his men also got there. They immediately went down the island to capture Junho. Unfortunately, before he can send evidence and get help, Junho is caught by Frontman and his men. Unexpectedly, the figure of the man behind the Frontman mask turned out to be his own brother who he had been looking for. Junho asked his brother why he was doing all this. However, he had not had time to get an answer. Junho was shot by his own brother and fell into the sea. Elsewhere, Sang-woo, Se-byuk and Gi-hun, who managed to escape, were welcomed to change their clothes and have dinner together. While changing his clothes, Se-byuk looks pale with blood that continues to flow from her stomach. It turned out that a large piece of glass from the previous game had stuck right in her stomach. She tore her uniform and covered the wound with it. Shortly thereafter, Gi-hun and the others were served delicious food for the first time. Gi-hun and Sang-woo devoured their food to the end. While Se-byuk, who was still in pain, was not even able to cut the meat on his plate. After dinner, each of them was armed with a small knife. Gi-hun looks still angry at Sang-woo for killing the previous player. Gi-hun intends to kill Sang-woo with his knife and win the game with Se-byuk. After that, he approached Se-byuk and invited him to cooperate. However, Se-byuk, who has gotten weaker, told Gi-hun that if Gi-hun managed to survive and escape from there, he asked Gi-hun to take care of his little brother who is currently in the orphanage. After saying that, Gi-hun realized that Se-byuk's clothes had now been filled with blood. He panicked and ran to the door for help. Shortly thereafter, the organizers came with crates. Unexpectedly, when Gi-hun asks for help, Sang-woo turns out to have killed Se-byuk with his knife. It also makes Gi-hun feel guilty about Se-byuk and becomes increasingly angry at Sang-woo. While Sang-woo casually said that he only wanted to help Se-byuk to end all his suffering. The next day, the last game arrived. The two remaining people, Gi-hun and Sang-woo, will play a game called Squid Game. Incidentally, the game was their childhood game. They then get different roles. Gi-hun plays the attacker and Sang-woo as the one who survives. As always, from another room, the guests are welcome to watch the final game and witness who will come out victorious. Gi-hun and Sang-woo, who were both carrying knives, then used the blades to attack each other. In the midst of the heavy rain, the two began to fight so fiercely. On one occasion, Sang-woo managed to grab a knife and stab Gi-hun's body several times. But Gi-hun, who did not give up, continued to rise and continued to fight back. Gi-hun's efforts were successful in making Sang-woo helpless. With the knife stuck in his hand, Gi-hun approached Sang-woo, who was already helpless and intended to kill him. And as it turned out, Gi-hun couldn't bear to do that and instead stuck his knife next to Sang-woo. He decided not to kill Sang-woo and walked to the finish line. But he can't do that. Surprisingly, Gi-hun decided to quit the game. That means, Gi-hun doesn't want to take his prize money and chooses to save his best friend. In accordance with the third rule, he only needed to ask Sang-woo to quit the game. But Sang-woo refused that and instead stabbed himself in the neck. Before he died, Sang-woo left his mother to Gi-hun. That way, inevitably Gi-hun was immediately declared the winner. After all his struggles, Gi-hun was returned to his place of origin complete with a credit card containing 45.6 billion won. With all that money, Gi-hun did not feel happy at all. He actually felt sad and frustrated at the death of hundreds of people, including his best friend. Even when he saw Sang-woo's mother, Gi-hun couldn't look into her eyes. Even more sadly, inside his house Gi-hun could only cry staring at the body of his dead mother. 1 year later, Gi-hun's appearance became even more messy. While he was sitting alone, he was offered flowers by an old woman. It turns out that in the flower there is an envelope containing a game card with the writing of the place that Gi-hun must go. After arriving at that place, Gi-hun was very surprised to see Il-nam being treated. Because what Gi-hun knows is that Il-nam should have died while in the marble game. Unexpectedly, Il-nam turned out to be a big boss as well as frontman's boss. Il-nam admitted that despite having a lot of money, he was not happy at all because he did not know how to spend all his money. Especially now that he has cancer in his brain and his life is predicted to be soon. In the end, Il-nam also thought of ways to have fun with all its money. Then, he remembered his childhood, which was always happy because he spent time playing with friends. Therefore, Il-nam and other rich people created the game arena so that he could enjoy the happiness of participating before he died. Hearing that, Gi-hun became very angry. How not, they are willing to sacrifice hundreds of lives just for fun. But Il-nam also reiterated that from the beginning he never forced anyone to join the game. Sincerely, Il-nam thanked Gi-hun for giving happiness by being his playmate for the rest of his life. After saying that, Il-nam died. The next day, Gi-hun begins his new life peacefully. He picked up Se-byok's brother at the orphanage and left the boy to Sang-woo's mother. Not to forget, Gi-hun also gave them a suitcase of money as a payment of his promise to Se-byok and Sang-woo. The movie ends with Gi-hun going to follow his daughter to America. Before leaving, he saw the young man who had invited him first was with the victims of the next game. After that, Gi-hun grabbed the card and called Frontman. Gi-hun promises Frontman that he will avenge all their foul deeds at any cost. And the movie is finished. So, that's the end of Squid Game. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support this channel. Thanks for watching this video until the end and see you in the next video.